Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an unbelievable and chilling story. Let's meet Cassius Holloway, a man who died in a car accident and was taken to a spiritual realm, where he had a complete review of his life and found his deceased wife. But what happened next was even more shocking. He received disturbing visions about the future of humanity, including religious leaders manipulating millions of people and times of chaos and transformation. What he saw on the other side will leave you speechless. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this intense and surprising journey. My name is Cassius Holloway, and what I'm about to share is not an attempt to convince anyone, nor is it a plea for sympathy. It's an account of the day I died, and what I saw beyond life. I know it may sound absurd. Death should be the end, not the beginning of something greater. But I've been on the other side. And when I came back, he was no longer the same man. Before the accident, my life was ordinary. I was 38 years old, living in Asheville, North Carolina, and working as an antique restorer. I've always been fascinated by time, by the way it transforms things. But while I knew how to salvage furniture and relics, I never knew how to fix the broken parts inside me. My wife, Eleanor, was my anchor. She saw the world with a hopeful eye and believed that each person had a purpose. I've never been so sure about that. As she talked about destiny and spirituality, I responded with skepticism. If there is a purpose for all of us, why is there so much pain? She just smiled and said, "Maybe pain is part of the path, Cassius. Something that takes us to where we need to be." I never agreed to that. But on that rainy night, life, or perhaps death, would teach me that Eleanor had been right all along. The accident that changed everything. It was a Saturday, the end of October. The sky was heavy with heavy clouds, and the rain was beating down on the car's windshield. We were returning from a visit to my mother, a 3-hour drive along winding mountain roads. Eleanor suggested we stop to rest at a roadside motel, but I insisted we continue. "Cassius, it's getting dangerous. We're almost there, just another hour." If I had known that those were the last moments we would have together, I would have stopped. I would have held your hand a little tighter. I would have said everything I never said. But I kept driving. And then, it happened. A flash. A bang. The silence. I died on that road. But death was not the end. It was just the beginning. The road was dark. The rain hammered the windshield, and the car's headlights illuminated only a few meters ahead. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My eyes tired but focused. I wanted to arrive soon. The idea of stopping and spending the night in a cheap motel didn't appeal to me. Eleanor, in the passenger seat, squeezed my arm. "Cassius, please. It's dangerous." I sighed, frustrated. "We're almost there, Eleanor. Less than an hour to go. That's if we get there in one piece." She wasn't wrong. The winding road, the heavy rain, the wind shaking the car, everything called for caution. But something inside me insisted on continuing. It was a mix of pride and impatience. And then, I saw the lights. A pair of headlights appeared out of nowhere, heading our way, too fast, blinding. There was no time to think, react, or even blink. The impact came like thunder, the sound of metal twisting, the glass shattering, the body being launched into space. And then, the silence. The first thing I noticed was the absence of pain. My body felt light. There was a feeling of suspension, as if I were floating. Time seemed to slow down, every drop of rain frozen in the air around me. So I saw it. My body. He was down there, trapped in the wreckage of the car, completely motionless. My face was covered in blood. My arm was bent in an impossible way. I should be feeling something, but he didn't feel anything. Eleanor was there too. I saw her move, coughing, trying to undo her seatbelt. "Cassius!" Her voice shook. "Cassius, please talk to me." I tried to respond. "Eleanor, I'm here." But my voice didn't exist. She didn't listen to me. It was then that I realized what was happening. I was no longer in my body. I was outside of it. Looking down, I saw red and blue lights reflecting off the wet road. The paramedics were running towards us. The ambulance siren sounded in the distance. But to me, everything seemed distant. As if I were on another frequency, a strange peace came over me. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel despair. There was only acceptance. That's when I noticed something different in the sky. A light. It didn't come from the ambulance or the car headlights. It was something bigger, something that called me. I felt my being pulled upward, and then everything disappeared. When I opened my eyes again, there was no more road, rain, or debris. The world around me was a silent void, but at the same time filled with a presence. There was no ground beneath my feet, no sky above my head. It was an infinite space, but not scary. An inexplicable calm enveloped me, as if everything made sense there. Then, a voice echoed. Cassius Holloway. It was a voice without a defined tone, without masculinity or femininity. She just was. It's time. Before I could ask, time for what? Something happened. Before me, my life began to unfold. I saw my birth, my mother holding me in her arms for the first time, sweat running down her forehead, tears of exhaustion and love mixed together. I saw my childhood, little moments that I didn't even remember. The day I learned to ride a bike and fell, crying. The night I stayed awake because I was afraid of the dark and my mother held me until I fell asleep. I saw my adolescence, the rebellion, the mistakes, the dreams I abandoned before even trying to make them come true. The harsh words I said to my father before leaving home, swearing I would never return. We, Eleanor. Our first date, our first kiss. The promises made and some broken. Each scene was more than just an image. I felt everything. If there was love in a moment, I experienced it in its purest form. If there was pain, I felt like it was happening right then. Time no longer existed. Everything happened at the same time. The voice spoke again. Nothing is lost. Every choice creates waves. And then, I saw what I had never noticed in my life. The small gestures that seemed insignificant. A smile to a stranger. A kind word. A moment of listening. They were more important than I imagined. But I also saw the times when I was cold, selfish, indifferent. Every harsh word, every look of contempt, every broken promise had a weight. Eleanor said that every person we touch carries a piece of us. Now, I understood. Every act, no matter how small, reverberated. And then, I felt guilty. A lot of guilt. There is no trial, Cassius. The voice interrupted my thoughts. Just learning. The scenes continued to pass, and my soul oscillated between moments of love and regret. If I could go back, I would do everything differently, but I couldn't go back. Not yet. It was then that I realized that something was blocking my path, an invisible barrier, and on the other side of it, an indescribable light. That's where I was supposed to go, but he couldn't move forward. That's when I saw the faces. Faces I knew. Faces of people who were somehow still attached to me. And then, I understood. I couldn't move forward while carrying the weight of my own emotional ties. I would need to forgive and be forgiven. I was facing something invisible but insurmountable, a barrier that separated me from the light. It was strange, because it wasn't physics. It wasn't a wall of stone or glass. It was something more subtle, but at the same time unbreakable. And then, the faces appeared. First, just undefined shadows. But little by little, I started to recognize them. The first face was my father. He was there, standing still, looking at me with an expression that mixed sadness and something deeper. Too bad I felt a tightness in my chest. The last time I saw my father, we got into an argument. I was young and arrogant, and he always wanted me to follow a more traditional path. He wanted me to take over the family store, but I dreamed of restoring old pieces, not selling new furniture. You never came back, my father said. His voice was a whisper, but it struck my soul like thunder. I wanted to respond, explain, justify, but there were no justifications. There was only the truth. He died without us having reconciled. And now, the pain of his absence was as strong as the pain of knowing that I never asked him for forgiveness. Other faces emerged. The of Elliot, an old childhood friend that I abandoned without thinking twice when I entered college and made new friends. The of Madeline, an ex-girlfriend that I left without even explaining. The of an unknown man, but which I recognized immediately. A beggar to whom I denied help once, without even looking me in the eye. They were all there, not to punish me, but to show me the weight of the actions I ignored. The voice spoke again, calm and firm. You can't move forward while you're stuck with what's left behind. What happened next was unlike anything I had ever felt. I felt their pain. It was not pain imposed as a punishment. It was an open truth. I felt my father's loneliness in the years I waited too long to return. I felt Madeline's confusion when I disappeared from her life without explanation. I felt Elliot's sadness as he realized that our friendship would never be the same. I felt the humiliation of the man on the street, ignored as if he didn't exist. All of this hit me at the same time. My soul screamed, "I'm very sorry." The words came out of me like a gale, but it wasn't enough to just say it. I needed truly forgive and be forgiven, and that's what I did. With my eyes closed, I repeated the names of each of them and said, with an open heart, "I forgive them, and I ask them to forgive me." It was the first time I truly let go of the weight of these memories. And then, it happened. The barrier disappeared. The light in front of me shined brighter. The pain turned into something different, an indescribable peace. I felt like I had finally lifted a weight that I had been carrying without realizing it. The voice whispered one last time, "Now, you may follow." And the light enveloped me. The love I felt in that moment was impossible to describe. It wasn't just love. It was something bigger. It was belonging. That's when I saw Eleanor. She was waiting for me. As soon as the barrier disappeared, I felt my being pulled into the light. But it wasn't a forced pull. It was as if I was being gently guided to where I was supposed to be. The light around me wasn't just glare. It was alive. It pulsed, emanating heat and peace. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced. And then, the scenario changed. The emptiness was replaced by something that seemed an infinite garden, but not an ordinary garden. The colors were more vibrant than anything my mortal eyes had ever seen. The trees seemed to sing in soft tones, and the air itself was charged with something indescribable. There was no fear. There was no anguish. There was only presence. And then, I saw her, Eleanor. She was there, standing calmly, more alive than ever. His dark brown hair shone as if it reflected the light of that place. His eyes, always full of tenderness, now carried something more, an absolute peace. For a moment I forgot everything. I forgot about the road, the accident, the pain. There was only her. My heart, if I still had one there, was filled with something indescribable. "Eleanor," my voice came out hoarse, shaky. "You are here." She smiled, the same smile that always comforted me. "Cassius, my love." Her voice was sweeter than I remembered. "You came all this way." I ran to her and hugged her, and her touch was real. It was not an illusion. It was warm, familiar, safe. For the first time since the accident, I cried, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something bigger. "I missed you so much." My voice broke. "I thought I lost you forever." Eleanor cupped my face with both hands and looked me in the eyes. "Cassius, you can't stay." The world around me froze. My heart plummeted. "What?" She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Your journey is not over yet." I shook my head. "No, I don't want to go back." I knew what that meant. If I went back, she would stay. Eleanor held my hand. "My love, you have something to do. Your mission on Earth is not over yet." My throat dried up. "What if I don't want this mission? What if I just want to stay here with you?" She just smiled, a smile filled with love and understanding. "I know it hurts, but one day we will meet again. And until then, you need to live." Before I could respond, something changed in the air around us. A new presence emerged. He was a being of light, tall, radiant. His form vibrated as if made of the very energy of that place. His name echoed in my mind before he even spoke. Luciel, Cassius. His voice sounded inside me. "Before you go back, there's something you need to see." And suddenly, everything changed. My body felt heavy. My vision darkened. And then, I saw it. I saw the future. As soon as Luciel spoke those words, I felt my being pulled again. The light around me disappeared, giving way to something very different. Suddenly I was hovering over the earth, but it wasn't Earth as we know it. It was a whirlwind of overlapping images, cities being swallowed by raging waters, crowds running in despair through the streets, natural disasters devastating entire regions. And then, I saw something even more disturbing. Political and religious leaders manipulating crowds. There was a man at the center of it all. He wore white robes, a sumptuous cloak, and a crowd revered him. He was sitting on a golden throne inside a huge cathedral. His eyes glowed strangely. There was something about him that made me shudder. He talked about peace, about unity, But his words were false, distorted, and people believed. Crowds knelt before him, giving him their hopes and their souls. But behind your serene gaze, there was darkness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to warn everyone that this was a scam. But no one listened to me. Luciel appeared at my side. "Do you understand what you're seeing, Cassius?" My voice cracked. "Who is this man?" Luciel looked at the figure in white and responded with regret in his voice. "It will be a symbol of transformation. But humanity will need to discern between truth and illusion." I trembled. "Is he bad?" Luciel didn't respond immediately. "Not everything is black or white. Some believe they are doing good, but end up becoming tools of darkness." My mind was spinning. "But people, they trust him." Luciel nodded. "And that's why chaos will come." My vision changed again. Now, I saw countries at war. There was hunger, despair, disease. But, amidst the chaos, I saw something different. Small groups of people helping each other. A woman sharing her last piece of bread with an unknown child. A man carrying an injured stranger in his arms, not caring about their differences. People protecting each other, even without understanding why. And then, I understood. Yes, there would be darkness. There would be chaos. But there would also be compassion. And this compassion would be the only thing capable of keeping humanity standing. Luciel touched my shoulder. "You must remember that, Cassius." I swallowed hard. "What can I do? I'm just a man." The being of light smiled. "It was just men and women who kept the light on in the darkest of times." I felt a shiver run through my being. "Is the future already written?" Luciel shook her head. "The future is made of choices." I was filled with questions, but before I could say anything, the vision disappeared. Everything went out. And then, I heard Eleanor's voice one last time. "Cassius, it's time to go back." Before I could protest, an overwhelming force pulled me away, and I woke up. Not hospital, alone. The first thing I felt was pain. It felt like my body was being crushed by a ton of concrete. Every muscle ached. Every bone felt cracked. My eyes opened slowly, blinking against the cold glare of the fluorescent lights. The smell of the hospital was strong. Antiseptic. Medicine. Something metallic. A constant beeping echoed through the room. I was alive, but something inside me screamed that something was terribly wrong. My vision was still blurred when a silhouette appeared next to me. The doctor. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and hesitation, as if he had a huge weight on his shoulders. Cassius Holloway. His voice was low, professional, but carried a serious tone. My throat was dry. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a hoarse moan. The doctor sighed. "You're in the hospital in Asheville. You were in a car accident." He hesitated. "I saw the moment your eyes changed. Cassius, I need you to remain calm." That warning was enough for panic to shoot up my spine. I knew. Before you even hear the words, I already knew. "Eleanor." My voice was scratchy. "Where's Eleanor?" The doctor did not respond immediately. He looked at the foot of the bed. "Cassius, where is my wife?" I tried to move, but my body was weak, tethered to the tubes and wires attached to monitoring machines. My chest hurt, but nothing compared to the pain growing inside me. The doctor took a deep breath. "She didn't make it." Those words were like a punch straight to my stomach. The room spun. Everything seemed to lose color. No, no. A scream stuck in my throat, a denial echoing in my being. No, that's not right. The memory of her in the spiritual realm came like a bolt of lightning. The hug, the smile, her touch. But I saw Eleanor. She was there. I spoke to her. The doctor exchanged glances with the nurse next to him. Both had that typical look of someone who thinks a patient is delusional. But I wasn't. I saw her. I touched her. Then, how could it be real that she was gone? Hot tears ran down my face without me controlling them. The silence in the room was deafening. And then, the guilt came like an overwhelming wave. If I had stopped to rest like Eleanor suggested, if I had listened to your voice instead of insisting, she would be here. But I was stubborn. And now, she was dead. And me. I stayed. But for what? What was left for me? My heart, which had experienced the purest love on the other side, was now being crushed by the cruel reality of this world. And at that moment, I wished I hadn't come back. Why without Eleanor? Nothing made sense anymore. Grief came like a storm, heavy, overwhelming, relentless. In the days that followed my recovery in the hospital, Time has lost any meaning. The hours were just shadows creeping across the sterile room, the beeping of machines constantly reminding me that I was still here, and she wasn't. The doctor, Dr. Samuel Whitmore, visited me frequently. He was a practical, tired-eyed man who seemed to have seen many tragedies like mine, but something about him changed after I woke up. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see it in his eyes. It was as if he saw something different in me. And then, one day, while he was making his rounds in my room, he could no longer hold back his curiosity. "Cassius," he crossed his arms, hesitant. "Do you remember anything after the accident?" I stared at him. The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked that before. Until that moment, I had kept everything to myself. What I saw, what I felt, what Eleanor told me. It seemed too absurd to say out loud, but something in Dr. Whitmore's look said he wanted, no, he needed it, to hear. I hesitated for a moment, but then I spoke. I told about float over my body, over the review of my life, over the barrier of forgiveness, and over Eleanor. The doctor listened to me silently, without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't laugh. He didn't call me crazy. He just nodded slowly, as if he was putting together the pieces of an invisible puzzle. And then he said something that gave me goosebumps. "You're not the first one to tell me something like that." After he left, my mind was spinning. If I wasn't the first, how many other people had gone through this? Had I come back for a reason? These questions swirled around inside me, but nothing answered the only question that mattered. What would I do now? And that's when I found the stone. That afternoon, as the nurse was folding my clothes to take home, something fell out of my coat pocket. A green stone. I recognized her right away. It was a rock I had as a child. A small, smooth piece of jade, which I carried in my pocket whenever I felt lost. My mother said it was a stone of hope. I had lost her years ago. How did it get in my coat? I took it between my fingers. Her weight was familiar. The heat, comforting. And then, something inside me calmed, as if, somehow, I knew there was still a path ahead of me. That night, for the first time since the accident, I slept without crying, because, even without fully understanding, I knew Eleanor was still with me, and that, somehow, I needed to continue. After leaving the hospital, the world seemed different. The streets were the same. People followed their routines, but I was no longer the same man who got into that car that rainy night. Before the accident, I saw life in a cold, mechanical way. Now, I saw each person as a living story, a soul filled with pain and hope. In the first few months, grief crushed me. Every place I visited reminded me of Eleanor. The mornings were lonely, the nights endless. But then, I remembered her words, "Your journey is not over yet." That's when I started paying attention to small gestures. An elderly man struggling to cross the street alone. A tired mother holding 2 bags and a baby at the same time. A young man sitting on a bench looking at the ground with tears in his eyes. Before, I would have passed straight by. Now, I stopped. I started offering help. First, simple things. Carrying a bag of shopping, buying a stranger a coffee, listening to someone who needed to talk. And then, something happened. People started to open up. I found that a simple, "How are you?" It could be the spark that stopped someone from giving up. And that's how I found it Clara Morrow, a young woman who, sitting alone on a park bench, I was on the verge of giving up on life. I simply sat next to him and asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" And she spoke. For hours. When we said goodbye, Clara hugged me and said, "If you weren't here today, I don't know what I would have done." That night, I understood my mission. The future I saw was not written in stone. It was shaped by the choices we made every day, and I would choose compassion. As the years passed, my pain became purpose. I didn't found an organization. I didn't become a public figure. My mission was quieter. I visited shelters, helped where I could, listened to people who needed to talk, and whenever I felt lost, I would hold the green stone in my hand and remember that Eleanor was with me, that everything was connected. One day, a friend asked me why I did this. My answer was simple: because every little gesture matters. I died that rainy night, but I came back with something much bigger than answers. I returned with the certainty that we are what we choose to be. We can be the darkness, or we can be the light. I made my choice. And you? If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time,